Everybody, welcome to this final part in the 1938 A Very British Civil War series before I start getting into the miniatures. This time I'll be reading up my scenario for the game, which is quite long. I hope you enjoy it. And I'll start reading then. So, the Harrogate Uprising, a scenario for 1938 A Very British Civil War. July 28th, 1938. The Army of the Seven Valleys marching up to North Yorkshire to meet up with the Army of the North and expel the Communist forces from the area. In order to establish a Royalist foothold, a detachment of the Grenadier Guards, commanded by Captain Edward Harrington, has been given orders to advance ahead of the main army. Their directive is to set up camp in the spa town of Harrogate, hold off any Communist aggression until reinforcements arrive to relieve the garrison, and continue the advance. However, the People's Assault Column of North Yorkshire, or PACNY for short, has managed to intercept the Royalist radios. Now being fully informed of their plans, they used their recently acquired supplies from Comrade Starling to ambush the Grenadier Guards on the way into the town. In this, they hope the Royalists can't gain a foothold into Communist territory. Comrade Captain Mickey Howard is tasked with this mission by Comrade Advisor Mikhail Chinkovich from the USSR, who assures him that his assault party will be equipped with the very best Soviet equipment. Howard is set to leave at dawn. July 29th, 1938. Captain Edward Harrington orders his men to be dressed in full parade uniform to look suitably smart for the local population, for a celebration to be held in the centre of Harrogate that evening. The platoon is making good time, but at 2:30 p.m, Comrade Captain Mickey Howard and his men burst out of the bushes and launched an ambush in the small town of Knaresborough, just outside Harrogate. The Grenadiers hastily fire their rifles at the Communist attackers, whilst Harrington sits on his horse completely baffled. Hastily finishing his tea, he draws his sword. Melee ensued, and Harrington drove his horse directly into the combat, which causes some of the Communists to flee. This allows the Grenadiers to stop using their bayonets and start shooting at the mob. Harrington begins to give out a rousing speech. However, it ends abruptly as Howard shoots the horse out from underneath him. The Communists retreat, which makes Harrington a tad bit miffed to say the least. The final death toll is 10 Grenadiers and 18 Communists. After this rude awakening, Harrington orders his subordinate, Lieutenant Henry Price, to fetch another horse, make another cup of tea, to calm his nerves and mourn the loss of his steed, before they start marching again. At 5 p.m, the guards reach Harrogate and, as a defensive position is set up, everyone is in low spirits. Following the cleaning of their kits, they were then permitted to rest. Harrington removes his bearskin and engages in hearty conversation with Harry Price in his room at the local inn. Comfort and fortitude are upon him, whilst his men are left outside in their tents. July 30th, 1938. Comrade Captain Mickey Howard returns to camp and reports of the defeat. On hearing this news, Comrade Advisor Mikhail Chinkovich proceeds to rant at Howard as the objective have failed. Only a bottle of vodka being placed in his hand settles him down. After some time, Chinkovich decides to send Howard out on a full assault on the Royalist position with 2 platoons and some local militia who wish to assist the revolution. Before their departure, it is made perfectly clear that there would be no more forgiveness, and indeed, if Howard were to fail in his mission this time, he would be given a firing squad. Meanwhile, at the Grenadiers' camp, the men wake and see black-clad soldiers coming towards them. They quickly grab their weapons, however, at the same moment, the soldiers unfurl a white flag. On reaching the sandbags, an officer steps forward and requests to speak with the commanding officer. He continues by announcing that he is Lieutenant John Hull of the BUF, and expresses their desire to assist in the fight against the Communists. On hearing this, a private runs to Harrington's room and tells him that the fascists want to help the garrison. Grumbling as he begins to put on his scarlet coat and bearskin, Harrington then makes his way down towards the base camp to meet the officer. With a heavy heart, he accepts the offer, but also requests that they are not to be stationed in a defensive position due to the lack of space, and rather must be positioned elsewhere. The officer salutes Harrington and turns to his men, smiling at the prospect of Communist blood that was to be spilt. The remainder of the day is relatively quiet for the garrison, and after a kit inspection, the men are left to their own devices. Some men write letters to their families, whilst others drown their sorrows in the Wellington pub. This proves to be much to the discontent of Harrington and Price, who are furious as they hear tales of their soldiers taking liberties with the local women and getting blind drunk. These men are, as expected, suitably punished. The People's Assault Club of North Yorkshire spends that night in a camp just outside of the town, preparing for the following day's battle. They sing many revolutionary songs around the fire with zeal. On the other hand, Howard is in his tent with his trusted friend, Comrade Lieutenant Nathan Johnson, confiding his fears to him. In an attempt to lift Howard's spirits, Nathan passes him a bottle of whiskey and reassures him of just how passionate his men are and how much faith they hold in their commander. Shrugging this off, Howard takes another gulp of whiskey. Without warning, he stands up and grabs the assault column's colour. So his bravery and compassion could not be denied by the sceptics at camp. Howard would leave from the front with the flag in hand, and if he were to die, then it would be a hero's death. Laughing, Nathan remarks that Howard is a ruddy nutter, and so that sense resumes, he should keep drinking. Laughing in return, Howard takes Nathan's advice about the drinking. Nonetheless, in the back of his mind, he knows that the next day would be his last. July 31st, 1938. At 6 a.m, a guardsman bursts into Harrington's room and reports that a company of communists have been seen on the outskirts of town by the BUF. Harrington leaps out of bed and tells the guardsman that every man must be fully dressed and prepared to fight to the last. Giving a hasty salute, the guard sprints away to deliver the order. Harrington then proceeds to get dressed, pulling on his finest red coat and freshly brushed bearskin. Turning to Harry Price, and with a twirl of his moustache, he asks him if he looks smart enough to meet the king. Price nods, to which Harrington replies, "Good, and I should be dressed well enough to meet God." Together the two men then walk down to camp with swords drawn, where they are greeted by all the guardsmen arranged in two ranks. Standing proud with immaculate kit and bayonets on rifles, they let loose a cheer as their captain approaches them. Even the drunkards from the night before are looking smart, despite quite a serious hangover. Harrington smiles with a tear in his eye. He then composes himself and confidently says to his men, "Gentlemen, it is my honour to fight alongside the pride of the British Army. Let the communists rue this day they dare to face us. Make your friends, your family, and your country proud. Be brave. Fear God. Honour the King." The men all let out a rousing cheer as Harrington then orders his men to man the barricades. Meanwhile, Howard is at the head of his men with colour in hand, just as he vowed he would do the night before. Nathan is at his side with pistol drawn, and the column are singing the Internationale with pride. Howard then draws his pistol with his right hand to prepare for the fighting that would soon come. Lieutenant John Hull and his BUF Legion, who are positioned in various buildings surrounding Harrogate, then give the order to fire with the shout of, "Show those commie bastards what for, men!" As the fastest fire, Howard orders his militia to leave the column and to neutralise the ambushes in the buildings, whilst the regular soldiers provide supporting fire at the same time as they continue to advance towards the grenadiers. The militia sprints to the buildings and draw their knives. They then barge the doors down and brutally slaughter anybody who shows any opposition to them. John Hull hears the militia running up the stairs, screaming their war cries, so he orders his men to fix bayonets and turn to face a new threat. As they come into view, the militia are fired upon and then have to climb over the bodies of their dead comrades. They eventually reach the top and smash into the remaining enemy, hacking at them viciously. Hull slowly backs away, still firing his pistol, but is eventually cornered after running out of ammunition. After screaming, "God save the King!" he runs into the mob to accept his fate. Here he is cut down instantly and inhumanely mutilated. All 35 men in the BUF that are stationed there had been wiped out. Returning back to the column after finishing their dirty work with their old enemy, the militia carries on advancing towards the guards. The communists are now in clear view for the grenadiers, and they break from their marching column into a loose skirmish screen and begin firing shots at the barricades. Harrington raises his sword and shouts, "Make ready!" The guards prepare themselves to fire. "Present! Fire!" The sound of rifles fills the air as several communists collapse. "Present! Fire!" Yet more of the enemy fall, and at that moment Howard shouts, "Forward, comrades! Purge the royalists from our land!" The communists erupt in cheer as they begin running towards the barricades. Harrington hastily orders his men, "Fire at will!" and the guards begin frantically firing at the communists as the communists close the gap. Harry Price puts his sword back into his scabbard and retrieves a rifle from a fallen guardsman. In doing so, he begins picking off enemy NCOs with extreme accuracy. Whilst he reloads, he turns to Harrington and enthusiastically says, "By God, I didn't know I had it in me, sir." Harrington nods approvingly as Price continues to fire. The communists then smash against the barricades and begin to clamber over them. Some are impaled by bayonets, but others are able to get over and engage in close combat with the guardsmen. Howard jumps onto the sandbags and waves the colour to show that the barricade's been captured, and with another cheer the communists push up. Price sees Howard and with his crimson flag and hastily puts a bullet in his head. Howard crumbles into the mob, dead. Letting out a blood-curdling scream, Nathan Johnson, who at the loss of his friend, picks up the flag and charges at Price, who immediately drops his rifle and tries to pull out his sword to no avail. Nathan stabs him in the stomach, and as the life drains from him, Nathan twists the blade and pulls it out. Price falls to the floor and into a sea of his own blood. Having witnessed this fierce slaughter, 3 guardsmen immediately shoot down Nathan. Harrington dismounts his steed to cradle his fallen subordinate, with a tear rolling down his cheek as the carnage of battle continues around him. The remaining guardsmen withdraw to where Harrington is kneeling and instinctively form a circle around him. They fight bitterly as the communists push themselves forward, and just as the day looks lost, all the men are determined to fight to the end and not let the communists succeed. A bugle sound can be heard resounding across the field as lancers from the army of the Severn Valley are seen in the distance. Behind them are 3 platoons of infantry. The communists turn and see these lancers speeding towards them, and immediately turn back and run for their lives as the grenadiers look on in disbelief. Harrington stands back up again and shouts, "Well, by God, what are you waiting for? Avenge your fallen brothers and see them off." The guardsman adds, "Huzzah!" and runs after the fleeing enemy. The day is won. As the battle draws to a close, Harrington mounts his horse and rides up to the captain of the Lancers and shakes his hand. "That was a damn close thing, wasn't it?" the Lancer says to him, beaming with pride. "It most certainly was." "Yes, it was," Harrington replies solemnly. "Well, I wish you all the best, sir, and I'll get my lad to continue the pursuit." The Lancer gives a tall and proud salute and rides off. Harrington turns to the pile of dead bodies at the sandbags and the 15 remaining guardsmen who are rejoicing their victory with the reinforcements. In no hesitation, Harrington shouts to an NCO to make him a cup of tea, the way all victories should end. August 4th, 1938. The defenders of Harrogate, as the 15 guardsmen became nicknamed, are lined up for Price's funeral, and Harrington is bidding farewell to his fallen friend. As he lays his hand on the coffin, he begins to cry. Returning to the line, he draws his sword, and through the tears, he shouts, "Present! Fire!" As the guards give a gun salute, Lieutenant Harry Price is lowered into his grave. Aftermath. The Army of the Severn Valley continued its march and eventually met the Army of the North at Leeds, where they laid siege to the city and eventually took it over from the Communists. Captain Edward Harrington was awarded the Military Cross and Lieutenant Harry Price was awarded the Victoria Cross. The People's Assault Column of North Yorkshire was now more or less wiped out at Harrogate, and any survivors became amalgamated with the People's Assault Column of West Yorkshire. Comrade advisor Mikhail Chinkovich was ordered to return to the USSR, where it was expected he would be executed for the loss of a battalion when the orders were overwhelmingly in his favour. Comrade Captain Mickey Howard and Comrade Lieutenant Nathan Johnson's bodies would never be identified, and thus would undoubtedly be buried in a mass grave, much to the annoyance of the People's Army of West Yorkshire, who, rightly so, wanted to give them a hero's burial for their acts of bravery on that day. Lieutenant John Hull was eventually found by the BUF, despite the extent of mutilation inflicted upon him. The only distinguishing mark on his fallen body was that of a very beaten dog tag which lay embedded within his slit throat. He was given a hero's burial by the fascists, and as a result of what happened to him, the BUF has resulted in being without mercy to all communist prisoners in the Yorkshire area for vengeance. So that's the story behind my scenario for 1938, a very British Civil War. I hope you enjoyed that. It did get a bit gritty towards the end, but I'm personally quite proud of that, and I'm really looking forward to starting to game this really interesting game. So if you missed out on any of the other parts, such as the background for 1938, a very British Civil War, watch the first video in this series. If you want to know a little bit more about the news, what am I on about? If you want to learn a little bit more about the rules, then look at my quick overview of the Went the Day Well rules for the game. So, once again, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.